From Star Trek, Picard's cathartic finale, to our favorite ships for a future legacy. This is why Star Trek, Picard's ending has left fans with more questions. After 3 amazing seasons of Star Trek, Picard, we just said goodbye to this incredible series, which has been fondly thought of as the next generation of the next generation. The show is a nostalgic fan favorite, which followed the iconic character of Jean-Luc Picard, played by Patrick Stewart, and reunited almost all of the original cast from Star Trek, The Next Generation, and the movie Star Trek Nemesis. And in case you need a refresher, here's a quick recap. At the beginning of the finale, we learn the Borg have assimilated all of the Starfleet cadets, took over its fleet, and were ready to destroy the only defense system that Earth has left. Hunting down the Borg, our heroes trace their signal to a huge Borg cube hiding in the middle of Jupiter's eye. When they decode the signal, they find that it's Jack Crusher's voice, the son of Jean-Luc Picard and Commander Beverly Crusher. Jean-Luc has no choice. He says what began 35 years ago ends tonight. Jean-Luc asks Beverly to let me bring him home and beams down to the Borg cube, sending Riker and Worf to look for the transmitter while he searches for Jack. When he finds him, it's a horrifying sight. Jack is wired into the Borg cube and completely assimilated. Jean-Luc offers to take Jack's place, but the Borg Queen, who was waiting for him, just laughs. Meanwhile, Data is dealing with his own ultimate challenge. In order to reach the transmitter, he has to fly the Enterprise directly into the center of the Borg cube. He says, "My gut tells me I can do this," and a million fans sighed at the thought of Data having a real gut. Of course he reaches the core, but the catch is they'll have to destroy the cube and everyone on it to stop the transmitter. And our heroes will only have seconds to get away after the Enterprise fires. Meanwhile, Jean-Luc jacks himself into the Borg to make contact with his son. The clock is ticking as the Enterprise is forced to fire. Jean-Luc and Jack share a tender moment. All seems lost for our friends until Riker sends a last message of love to Deanna Troi, who is able to sense their location, and the Enterprise beams them up just in time. As the Borg cube is blown to oblivion, we get a last flash forward to where young Jack is getting his first Starfleet assignment as special counselor to the captain on the Enterprise G. Seven is captain. Rafi is first officer, and the whole thing wraps up with Jean-Luc leading his dear friends in a game of poker. Just like he did long ago, he says, "I've come to believe that the stars have always been in my favor, and may they always be." Jean-Luc Picard. It was a cathartic send-off with tons of satisfying moments, but it still leaves lots of questions for Star Trek fans. But when showrunner Terry Matalas was asked about his original plans for the wrap-up, it turns out there was quite a bit that never actually came to light. For one thing, in his original script, he was planning on giving Data, played by Brent Spiner, a scene with the android Soji, played by Issa Briones, but it was not to be. And there might have even been more familiar characters in this finale too. Tallis mentioned a scene that he'd written, where they found Ro in the dungeons of the Intrepid with Tuvok, and that she had survived, even though we saw her die in a shuttle explosion earlier this season. Speaking of legacies, Terry was also planning on giving a stronger nod to Voyager in the finale, because even though we got to see 7 of 9 get promoted to captain, he said, "We have wanted some more Voyager folks to come be part of 7 of 9's promotion." He stopped short of saying which characters those might be, and unfortunately, none of these tantalizing scenes came to pass. And surprise, surprise, it all came down to budget. Apparently, the producers had a pretty hilarious response when they first read the script. Terry was told, "Are you out of your f***ing mind with these things? You are not Avengers Endgame." One incredible cameo he did manage to sneak in, though. We get one last-minute scene during the final credits that hints at further stories with Jack Crusher. When we see Q, who is clearly not dead, confront Jack as he's settling into his new quarters in the Enterprise G, he says, "Young mortal, you have much ahead of you," setting up the future trials of the Crusher Kid, which totally gives us chills. In fact, the finale leaves many questions still unanswered. The first question is right there in the post-credit sequence: what is the future of Jack Crusher? And speaking of Soji, Data's synthetic descendant, what happened to her? Last we saw Soji, she was on a diplomatic tour to promote synths to the Federation and the rest of the galaxy. Will we see her return, and what will happen to the synths now that they are no longer banned? And what about the changelings? The whole changeling thing kind of disappeared, overshadowed by the Big Borg storyline in the finale. But one thing that hints at the possibility of their return is that the new technology Beverly Crusher developed to wipe out the Borg virus also just happens to detect changeling activity too. Well, here's one question we can answer. So, when Jack moves into his quarters on the newly named Enterprise G, he displays a picture of his parents, Picard and Crusher, in fancy evening wear. Since Jack didn't know his father Picard while he was growing up, and his mother Beverly cut him out of her life, where did he get this picture? We may never know, but we can tell you where the real-life photo came from. It's a real photo of actors Patrick Stewart and Gates McFadden, celebrating at the premiere of the series Television at KCET Studios in 1988. So to be clear, there's a picture of television stars at a premiere of a television series called Television, in an episode of a television series that takes place far in the future, starring those same television stars today. Just in case you were looking for some extremely meta trivia today. So after that mind melter, the next big question on everyone's mind is there going to be a Star Trek legacy? The Picard finale was left perfectly open-ended, with lots of opportunity to carry this next generation into a new series. And many of the cast and creative team behind Picard have talked about how much more they would love to do with these characters. Nothing has been made official yet, but when showrunner Terry Matalas was asked if Star Trek Legacy would be a thing, he said, "I have 1001 ideas, so hopefully the television fates will allow it to happen." And Ed Speleers, who plays Jack Crusher, is equally excited. He said, "I would love, genuinely from the bottom of my heart, I would love to keep playing Jack Crusher." There's no question that there's so much more to explore. For one thing, it would be amazing to not only see Seven of Nine continue to helm the Enterprise G now that she's finally captain, but to see her captain her own series too, after all she's been through. And speaking of ships, what about those enticing relationships that were set up during Picard's season run? Even though we didn't see much of the relationship between Seven of Nine and Raffi during Season 3, and the two women were supposedly broken up due to Starfleet regulations. There's no reason why this romance couldn't continue in the new legacy, right? When showrunner Terry Matalas was asked whether Raffi and Seven could finally be together, he said, "Will this absolutely be a story you want to tell in the future? A story about a captain who loves her first officer and vice versa? Absolutely." And then there's those adorable crew kids, Jack Crusher and Sydney LaForge. Their flirtation started in Season 3, when we learned that Jack was able to communicate with Sydney through telepathy, just like fan-favorite couple Will Riker and counselor Deanna Troi. So let the shipping begin. We will all wait anxiously to find out if Star Trek Legacy will get the green light. Until then, that was why Star Trek Picard's ending has left fans with more questions.